Hello and welcome to ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. Today we are privileged and honored to have with us Mr. Romy Udanga. Mr. Romy Udanga is the chairman, multicultural sector of Labour Party in New Zealand. He's also a Labour Party candidate for North Shore electorate. Good afternoon, sir. Good evening over there. So pleased to have you join us today. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Alma, and I would like to say hello to all the listeners and viewers who are tuned into your station tonight. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Sir, what are the significant developments in your country right now, in New Zealand right now?
One of the good things that we've heard is we came down to just 8 new cases of COVID-19 today. So first time that we're hitting single-digit numbers. But sadly, we also had 2 deaths, and that brings the death toll now to 11. The numbers have been creeping up slowly. We're now, I think, 1,400 or more, 1,409 specifically, cases in New Zealand. But out of that, we have 816 cases that have been reportedly were able to recover from COVID-19. So that's something like 60% of those who had COVID-19 in New Zealand have recovered. The sad part is we lost people. You know, in New Zealand, the reason why the government went hard and went hard early is so that we can save lives in New Zealand. So we knew that we were going to lose lives, but it's still sad knowing that we actually lost 11 people so far. So that's what's happening in New Zealand. The other good thing is, out of those who have COVID-19, we only have 14 people in our hospitals, which means to say our hospital system in New Zealand is very much in a position to really service people who will be in that position to need medical assistance during this period.
Yes, go ahead, sir. Go ahead, sir.
The other thing that is new is we had an update as to how far the wage subsidy that the government has initiated reached the people in New Zealand. Very early on, the package that the government delivered was in the tune of $12 billion.
Okay.
And they allocated that and said, okay, we need to improve our health system, make it ready for COVID-19. And the big part of that was to support workers and sole traders whose livelihood will be affected by the lockdown that was announced by the government. So looking at the numbers today, we have distributed up to $10 billion. And those $10 billion went to roughly 1.6 million people. So these are workers and sole traders. The structure of our economy in New Zealand is our businesses. About 80% of our businesses are small and medium-scale businesses.
Okay.
So for the sole traders, making sure that they have the subsidy coming from the government is something that is really, really good. It keeps the economy flowing.
Okay.
It's a big amount too, $585 over a period of 12 weeks was given to every worker who's affected by COVID-19. So these are the non-government workers whose livelihood, who've been told that they have to stay at home to break the transmission of COVID-19. Yeah.
So, actually, that is my next question, how the government is going to deal with the national unemployment arising from this COVID-19 pandemic and its effect on the economy. Actually, the finance minister quoted that New Zealand will face an economic shock, a quantum greater than the 2008 global financial crisis. Now, you talked about the COVID-19 wage subsidy scheme that has been developed to help businesses and affected workers in the short term as they adjust to the initial impact of COVID-19. But this wage subsidy scheme, is it only for the private sector and not for state government sector workers? As I think I read on the...
Basically it is for what we call the private sector, non-government entities, because the government entities, their wages, their income continues regardless of whether they are at home or they are in the front line or they're doing service to the community or even if they're working at home. The wages are paid for by the government. So it's the non-government sector that is affected a lot because businesses, private entities, when the government said we're going to lock down, of course, the businesses will not have revenue over that period while their cost will continue. So that is one way for the government to make sure that while there is impact on workers in the private sector and businesses as well, businesses and their workers will continue to have that connection so that when we get out of COVID-19, we can be assured that we have the people that we need to run businesses and to run industries. Yeah. So
Yes, go
yeah,
ahead,
the numbers are big when you look at it. So far, 20 billion has been spent by the government in making sure that the people have the money and the economy continues to function. So 20 billion, but half of that has been given directly to workers. Okay, these are people. These are named people actually. So we know who the people are who receive the wage subsidies, and the 1.6 million people that we're talking about constitutes about 60% of our workers and sole traders in New Zealand. So that's a big chunk. Considering that, let's say, the other 25-30% belong to the government sector, then there is a 10 to 15% of workers who continue to work and continue to receive regular pay from their employers. So those are very good numbers when you look at the support that people are getting.
Okay, so how is Parliament working with the government in passing measures for the government and the Prime Minister in coping with this actually slowing economy already? Yeah.
Yeah, Parliament is still going on, and of course they do it via video conferencing. So there's a lot of software, a lot of applications that are now picking up in New Zealand. You've got Zoom, Skype, Facebook Live, and all the other applications that are being used. Parliament is still going on, and we are waiting for the Prime Minister to make an announcement in 3 days' time, actually, because with the data that's coming out, we want to know if the Prime Minister is going to allow us to get out of lockdown or if we have to continue with the lockdown. So that's what the nation is waiting for. We'll hear about that on the 20th of April. So that's 3 days from now. You mentioned something about the finance minister talking about
Yes.
some dismal forecasts, actually.
Yes.
There was a Treasury report, and that Treasury report outlined what the impacts will be to New Zealand during COVID and post-COVID-19. But that report is not the position of the government, by the way.
Okay.
The position of the government will be known and will be announced by the government during the daily update that they are delivering to the people. One of the items in there is a scenario that will show 13 to 26% of unemployment in New Zealand, and we already heard the Prime Minister saying we cannot allow that. And right now they're looking at ways to make sure that that does not happen. There has been a new announcement of packages that are targeted specifically, for example, to the small and medium enterprises, which comprise, as I said, 80% of the businesses in New Zealand. So that support, like for example, businesses who have paid their taxes already can request that the taxes they paid for be paid back to them because of what we call a tax loss carryback system. So we're now assuming that instead of say the first quarter of the financial year or the second quarter of the financial year being good years, we're now expecting that the whole year will not be that good. So those who have paid their taxes very early on a monthly or quarterly basis can now request that their taxes be paid back to them. So that is something like 3.1 billion going back to small and medium enterprises. Again, a lot of help going to businesses.
What about our our kababayans over there? Do you have any updates for us on those who are affected by this crisis?
Yeah. We can classify our kababayans here as the residents and the citizens. So there's not much of a problem for those who are residents and citizens. Then we can have a look at, say, for example, our workers, people who are on work visa. And roughly 90% of those who are on work visa are either receiving their current salaries or are in that wage subsidy scheme that we talked about, right? There is maybe 10% or even less than 10% of them who have fallen into a gap. People or workers who have resigned and were intending to move to new employers who are now prevented from doing that. Workers who have been in the process of going into new employment, now prevented from going into that. The good thing about this is, in terms of support, there are several groups, actually Filipino groups, who are supporting people in New Zealand in that category, and even including students and those on tourist visa, and they are being provided with food support if they need food support. Yeah. I dare not mention the names here because if I mention one and I miss the other,
Yes.
I don't want them to feel bad about this. But I know of several who are doing this, several groups, and also the government has released a lot of has released funds to those community groups who are providing food to the different communities. So even Filipinos who are, say, on tourist visa or say work visa but are not able to work, they can call those numbers. They can call on the groups that are providing food, and their food will be delivered to them via courier. Yeah, so that's one good thing that's happening as well in New Zealand.
What about your frontline healthcare staff and other frontliners who are actively exposed? What are you doing for them, for example?
There's one data that was announced this morning, and to date, out of the thousands of healthcare workers that we have, 128 have reportedly been infected by COVID-19. So that's 1 to 8. The study, however, points that about half of them were acquired outside of the workplace environment. So roughly 60 workers, we still haven't determined whether they got the COVID-19 in the workplace or outside of the workplace. So that is something that I'm waiting comments on as well. How many of the 128, sorry, how many of the 60 workers who were infected but not outside of the workplace, how many of them can we attribute to them being infected in the workplace? Yeah. We have received PPEs, and there are now guidelines coming from the Ministry of Health into district health boards. The way distribution is happening, by the way, is instruction comes from the Ministry of Health, and then it goes to the, maybe you can say, regional district health boards. And the regional district health boards are the entities that distribute the equipment, the personal protection equipment, not only to the hospitals, but to all the frontline institutions that need them, right? So home cares, elderly care, and even including the hospitals that we have. Yeah. The
He,
situation, sorry, just to qualify it, the situation in New Zealand is that we don't have that many private hospitals. So many of the hospitals are public in New Zealand, which makes it easier for us to distribute PPEs to the public hospitals. However, when it comes to the provision of help to, say, the aged care sector, many are private entities, and many of them are not that big. So those are the ones that the medium industry ones that are needing support in terms of PPE as well.
the Prime Minister is going to announce on Monday whether the lockdown measures will be eased. This will be on Monday?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. So, what will she base that on easing the lockdown measures there in New Zealand?
A lot of factors come into play. Like, for example, today we said that we're down to single-digit infection, new infection numbers. But that's only one of the factors. The other factors would be up to the Ministry of Health to supply to the government, including the tendency or let's say, just the probability of us going back to lockdown stage again. It's the way the government is saying this is, if we are on alert level 4 now and we go down to alert level 3, we have to make sure that we don't go back to alert level 4. Alert level 4 is the country is in lockdown. Alert level 3 is that we allow activities that are safe, meaning to stay social distancing in place, minimize getting interaction with other people, kind of businesses that are providing services will have to abide by them as well. So what we intend to do is that we don't go back to alert level 4 if we can, right? So all the data that the government is looking into, they will base it on a quantum of data that will be available to the government on the day that they will make the decision. That's how it is.
Yeah.
The good thing is, even now, the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has made it clear what to expect, assuming we go to alert level 3. So there is readiness among the people. If, for example, it's announced that we are going to alert level 3, people will not be at a loss on how they will deal with alert level 3. The government is really good in letting us know, setting expectations and knowing how we're going to act during certain circumstances.
As we know, these are not normal times, and there are risks that will need to be managed, no, as in opening the economy. So what direction really is the government of New Zealand going to?
I don't want to jump the gun on whatever the government is going to do.
Okay.
Actually, I have my own preference, for example, but I'd rather not say what my preference is. I'm willing to listen to what the government is going to say. They have the data. They would know where the government is going to, the direction that the government is going to take. They would have the measures in place. They will have the financial packages to offer to the community. If you notice, what has happened is the first thing that the government did was to act swiftly and you can say with no regrets. Let's do this. It has to be done. And once that was done, they did something to improve the confidence of the people by providing cash flow in terms of the wage subsidy and support to businesses, right? This comes, if you look at it, it's not a phase like one stops and the next one will get into play. It's more like an overlapping waves, right? So you've got wave one is still rippling, and then there's a wave coming, and it's still rippling, and then there will be a third wave coming, and it will the ripple effect will still be felt. So the third wave will be to act in coordination and to secure support for the financial and business sector. And this is what the government is looking at now. They're even talking about increasing the package available for us to get out of COVID-19 by another $20 billion. So far, $20 billion have been allocated and spent. They're looking at another $20 billion in case we need it, just so we can secure our businesses and financial institutions and get out of this in the economy in a much better condition than expected.
Another maybe sensitive matter altogether. In some countries, Asians are facing discrimination, stigma. It has ranged from vandalism or verbal abuse. How is New Zealand dealing with this unsettling problem? Do you have this problem in New Zealand as well?
So far, out of the 100 news items or let's call information that's relayed to me, I have not heard one that has to do with discrimination. And I think it's because New Zealand is a very, very open country. It is a very, very diverse country. We have more than, in the capital alone, Auckland, we have more than 200 ethnicities. And we've learned to live with each other, to not just to tolerate each other, but to understand what each other means and what is important to each other. There is a lot of respect, I would say, in New Zealand for diversity, and that example is coming from the Prime Minister as well. Yeah. You know, the mantra of Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is "be kind," right? Every time that she goes on television, that mantra of "let's be kind to each other, let's be kind, let's be kind, let's show kindness to people," that has always been coming out. So that kindness is now infecting the whole of New Zealand, and it's showing. Kindness begets respect, and there's respect showing among our diverse communities.
All right, before we let you go, any last message for us, sir, during this crisis?
During this crisis,
Yes.
One of the things that we do at home is we pray for people who are on the front line, especially our medical people, wherever they are in the world. I would like to request the viewers and your listeners to do the same thing. Say a prayer for the people. We don't know who they are. They may be our relatives, family members of our family, or friends, or unknown to us. But let's say a prayer for them. They're doing a lot for us. This is not an economic failure. This is a medical failure. This is, yes. And we need to look at it from that perspective, our new heroes, those who are in the medical front line.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your time, and stay safe. Look out for each other. Thank you so much for that message.
And thank you so much, Alma.
Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you for the opportunity.